Hello and welcome to this DW News live stream on the second week of the Iran war. I'm Biresh Banerjee.
And Anthony Howard.
And in this stream today, we want to focus on what Israel's endgame in Iran and Lebanon is. We'll be speaking to our correspondent in Israel and an analyst in Lebanon. We'll also be looking at what Iranians are going through as their country faces a combined assault from the US and Israel.
And as ever, we'll be bringing your comments and your questions into this chat. Clearly, we've got, Baresh and I, a number of questions for our guests already, but it's really important that you ask yours and give us your comments as well. We've got the YouTube chat open. Likewise, on TikTok, that is definitely how this works best.
So send us your comments and questions, but not just that. I mean, if you have a chat open, feel free to send us what you think that the stream should be on. Every time we do the stream, we try and focus on a particular point. And as we said, today on the stream, we're looking at what Israel's end goals and end aims in Iran and Lebanon are. And with that in mind, we'd like to play for you what two senior figures in Israel have been saying to the media. This is the Israeli president and foreign minister explaining what their war aims are.
If Hezbollah thinks it can continue to harass or threaten, it simply does not understand what awaits it, and certainly does not understand that Israel is determined to dismantle it completely.
We want to remove, for the long-term, existential threats from Iran to Israel. It is hard to see it with the current regime, with the new Khamenei. The new Khamenei is not less extremist than the previous.
Right, so lots to discuss here. So let's bring in DW Jerusalem correspondent Tanya Kramer, who joins us now for more. Tanya, lots to unpack here, but let's just begin with an update on how it is going with Israel's war, the US-Israel war against Iran. Can you give us an update on where we are with attacks against Israel and by Israel?
Yeah, well, there have been several overnight missile launches at Israel. It's not at the same frequencies that we've seen that, in recent days, but people have been, running to the bomb shelter. Rescue services have said there were no major injuries except for those, on their way to the bomb shelter. And it seems that most of the missiles have been intercepted, but we don't have a clear picture on that. Now, we understand that at the same time, the Israeli military has carried out overnight several attacks and strikes in Tehran and what they describe as regime targets, regime infrastructure, as they put it. But also just shortly, they launched a new wave of strikes across Iran. And the same happens as well in Lebanon. We've seen again the Israeli military calling on residents in the southern suburbs of Beirut in the morning to leave the area. There have been strikes reported there as well as casualties and injuries. Obviously, we also heard the IDF spokesperson, Efi Devrin, last night saying that they will intensify the defense and also their control over points they have already in southern Lebanon going forward. And we also understand that they are redeploying an elite unit from the southern part of Israel around Gaza towards the northern border.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. We're talking about two fronts, essentially, the war with Iran and then the attacks against Lebanon. Let's just stay on the Iran angle here and pick up on what Gideon Saar was saying, those soundbites that we just played for our viewers. He was saying that Israel's war, that the new Khamenei is currently no less extremist than the previous one, and the long-term aim is to remove long-term existential threats from Iran to Israel. So it is quite clearly Israel's position then that Israel wants regime change in Iran and it wants a leadership that is favorable or compliant for Israel. Is that the correct interpretation here?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is, that there is probably the realization here, and that's what we're hearing from security officials, that, the regime change is not as easily done as maybe planned. So what we're seeing right now is that Israel is still going after, the military targets. I think they have a more clearer picture on that, the ballistic missile programs, the nuclear program, but also trying to decapitate, the political leadership in Iran. But basically whether, and we heard Gideon Saar saying that last night. I was doing a press conference with his German counterpart, Wadefull, who was visiting Israel, that, this leader is no less extremist than the previous one. So there is certainly, always this plan they're putting forward. We heard Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they want to create the conditions as to, for the Iranian people then to take over, but we don't know what that means. We don't know the timetable. He also didn't elaborate on that. So at the moment, I think the aim is, what we are hearing here, is to do as much as they can, because there's also the realization that it will be in the hands of US President Donald Trump when to end this war.
Just help us understand then, if regime change is realistically not that easy as it potentially sounds when leaders say it, why keep repeating it? I think this is the second time, at least if not more, that Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about the Iranian people rising up and taking control of their government. There doesn't seem to be any articulate opposition. So who takes over, and how do Iranians remove the Ayatollahs from power? Why keep repeating it?
Well, I think this is the question that many people are asking, what is exactly the plan? And we don't get a clear answer from politicians at the moment. So Israel is saying Iran has been openly declaring they want to annihilate Israel, and Israel, sees, and many Israelis here do see Iran as a major threat. So there is support, for this war. There is widespread support for this war, at least among the Jewish Israeli public. But the question is right now at this stage, what is the outcome of it? And I think we simply don't know yet.
Tanya, I'm just monitoring the chat here. Hi, it's Anthony. Good to see you. There is a question here from Coffee Meg that I'll put a pin in for you. I won't ask you to respond straight away, but maybe churn this over. Will you report on the casualties and destruction or the censorship happening in Israel right now? That's a comment from YouTube. It relates slightly to what I want to know about this question of regime change and Israel and the Ayatollah at the moment. A lot of people are saying that Trump is preparing the ground, that he's changing his goals to say that regime change is no longer part of the plan. How are Israeli media reporting this change, this possibility that seems to be coming up, that there will not be regime change in Iran at the end of this?
Yeah, I think, there is, when you're looking at polls, and, always we have to take them with a grain of salt, obviously, but there is widespread support at least among the Jewish Israeli public for this war. And there's not much opposition, for how Netanyahu and, his coalition is handling the war, although there are some critics always accusing Netanyahu for, prolonging this war. But if you look at polls, it doesn't really benefit him so much yet. The political camps are pretty much, 1 or 2 seats up or down. And we are in an election year as well, so we have to keep that in mind. But there is a general feeling, that among Israelis, that Israel needs to go this war to the end, and that pertains to Iran, but also to the situation in Lebanon against Hezbollah. But, because they have the feeling that, those ceasefires, especially when it comes also to the ceasefire, the last ceasefire in November 2024 with Hezbollah, they can't really rely on that. So this is why there is so much support. But as to whether, we see actually a real regime change, and we heard also that, I thought it was quite interesting that Gideon Saar mentioned that yesterday. He basically said, this might not happen even during the war, that might happen sometime later. There's a big question mark about that as well, because we simply don't know. We're into this war, but nobody knows how this war will end.
We were talking earlier, Tanya, about Benjamin Netanyahu urging the people of Iran to stand up and take control of their regime and remove the Ayatollahs, as this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But he has been talking about the defense budget as well, because there are reports that Israel is set to increase its defense budget by about $13 billion for the war effort. I want to talk about that, but I think it's just worth listening to what the Prime Minister has been saying about this aspect of Israel's preparedness.
But there's one big but here. It costs money, a lot of money. Therefore, we're required to provide a special budget during the war with tens of billions of shekels to help the defence budget for the war effort. I'm glad that the Minister of Finance stands by this important mission.
So, Tanya, just off the back of that, so a massive increase in defense spending for Israel. A, can Israel afford that? And B, what does that say about how much political capital Benjamin Netanyahu has at the moment to be able to effect such an increase in the defense budget?
Well, I think it's pretty clear, people are behind this right now. And I think it depends how much that is, continuing in this way. At the moment, I mean, there have been, victims and casualties as well. There are people that are injured in this war. So far, however, the defense seems to work to intercept most of the missiles. We were talking just earlier, you asked me about censorship. We don't know in real time where those missiles that are falling through, usually they fall, sometimes also in open areas, but there have been also hits reported. And I think this will very much shape the public opinion. But we don't have, at least on the political level, there is sort of a rallying around the flag. Right now, there is the support for going, with this war, also on the political level. But you look at the opposition, you're looking at, the government, the cabinet, they're all going the same way. So he doesn't really have a problem to move forward with this. I think it will come down to, what will this war achieve? And I mean, these are the questions that you asked in the very beginning. These are the questions at this point we cannot really answer. And I mean, Israel has a track record in the region, when it comes to political or targeted assassinations. And we just heard again, the foreign minister yesterday saying he thinks the new supreme leader is basically as extremist as the previous one. So obviously, we don't know how long this will going on and what is being planned. And whether there will be a regime change. But I think there is the sense here that Israel will take this opportunity to decimate as much as they can, Iran's military and ballistic and nuclear capabilities as much as they can.
Tanya, stay with us, because I do want to talk to you about the attacks against Hezbollah and in Lebanon. But there is something I wanted to bring up, and this is to our community directly. At least I'm looking at the chat on YouTube. I mean, I think there are some strong opinions there, but I think what is being lost over there is that there's a number of personal attacks, at least, happening against some of us and the kind of content that we're trying to bring in. I would just urge the community to try and just listen to what we're saying, because this is not the end of the stream. There are various other aspects to cover as well. And maybe one should give us a fair hearing to listen to what the arguments are being made. Just a plea from my side.
We're going to other parts of the world. We're bringing in more opinions and other angles.
We can't do everything all at once. It's coming one after the other. So just be a little patient and listen to some of the opinions that are potentially coming up, but then also be in dialogue with us. Tanya, just wanted to sort of come to you and talk to you about Hezbollah, because President Herzog was saying there that Israel is determined to dismantle Hezbollah completely. I just wondered about how realistic that aim is, given that most of the Israeli attacks on Lebanon are in the form of airstrikes or long-range strikes. So how realistic is it that Israel will be able to dismantle Hezbollah completely?
Well, I think you have to, look at this a bit on a wider picture. I mean, Israel has fought with Hezbollah for many, many years. This is not just coming after October 7. There has been also a war in 2006, even before that. And many times, Israel has declared victory over Hezbollah when it comes, to its weapon program. So this is not something new. It has been saying, it has been degrading Hezbollah capabilities south of the Litani River. It has been also in recent months attacked, southern Lebanon, on. And now again, we are seeing also these orders issued for all the people in the villages in southern Lebanon to leave the area again. I mean, many of them had just also moved back. So basically what Israel is doing once again is trying to say, we want to get Hezbollah, we want to degrade Hezbollah, we want to get them out of there. But again, this has been in conflict that has been going on for so long. So we have to wait and see this time what the success of this operation will be.
I'm going to bring in a couple of comments from the chat, Tanya, while you're still here. Regime change should be for Israel and the US, not Iran, comes from Amelia Amalia 4 from TikTok. And something echoed on YouTube. All this talk about regime change in Iran with no solutions in sight. Why don't we talk about regime change in Israel?
Oh, some strong comments there. Just one final thing that I wanted to sort of bring up with you, Tanya. Johann Wadephul, the German foreign minister, was in Israel. He paid a surprise visit to Israel, becoming, I think, the first European official to land in Israel since the war began. I just wanted to play a soundbite of what he said at a joint press conference and then get your take on what Johann Wadephul had to say. But first, the soundbite.
If they were ready for a diplomatic solution, it is achievable. But per now, this is what we hear from Tehran, they are not ready for a diplomatic solution. And as long as this is not the case, we still have to wait.
Lebanon. Right. Well, we were just discussing what we want to do. You were hearing, Tanya, the Johann Wadephul talk over there. Sorry. What was the message that he brought to Israel?
I think his message was, to bring, Israel standing side by side with Israel, to bring, a message of support again from Germany, supporting Israel that has attacked together with the US, Iran. And I think it was quite interesting to see that, however, Israel and Germany are a bit on different sides here. We saw that, while the German foreign minister was talking about, diplomatic solutions, we heard very clearly from the Israeli foreign minister that this is not yet the time for a diplomatic solution, that they might be even, intensifying this. At the end of the day, it is up to the US and Israel to decide when to end this war.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Tanya Kramer from Jerusalem, thanks so much.
Thanks, Tanya,
for joining us today. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Israel has renewed its attacks on Lebanon, and the impact on people there is evident. Here's Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson of the UN Secretary General.
Meanwhile, on the ground in Lebanon, our humanitarian colleagues report that nearly the entire population of people living in areas south of the Litani River, parts of Baalbek Governorate and the Bekaa Valley, and large sections of Beirut's southern suburbs are now caught up in hostilities as airstrikes and displacement orders continue. In the past week, more than 660,000 people registered themselves as displaced through the Lebanese government.
All right, let's get more now from Makram Rabah. He's Assistant Professor of History at the American University of Beirut. Professor Rabah, I don't know if you could hear what Stefan Dujarric was saying there, but numbers in excess of 600,000 registering themselves as displaced in Lebanon. The rate at which Israeli bombings are going, do you think that these numbers will go up?
There's a number of concerns. This is an ongoing tragedy, meaning that this is not a temporary humanitarian crisis. given the way that the Israelis are eradicating whole areas, particularly south of the Litani, which I believe even after the cessation of hostilities will become a no man's land, I don't think that these refugees will return to their homes anytime soon. Adding to this, that as you know, that Lebanon has gone through a very drastic economic crisis. Our civilian infrastructure to begin with cannot sustain the people who are occupying these areas originally. With this influx of refugees, especially that many of these people have occupied public schools, which means that down the road, there's no way for public education to go back to normal. And the way that the Israelis are going about it, and the way that Hezbollah is ignoring all of the warnings from within and from the region, indicates that this is an ongoing escalation that will not end anytime soon.
So what is the Israeli bombing campaign going to achieve, number one? And number two, will Hezbollah be able to achieve anything in its rocket campaign against Israel?
Well, to begin with Hezbollah and all the Iranian axis believe that even if they can throw a rock, this means that they are still alive and still struggling. Where I believe that the Israelis, while they claim that they want to destroy Hezbollah's infrastructure, they might be able to, we never know. But in reality, they have created or carved out a buffer zone. This buffer zone allows them to keep the inhabitants of the northern areas of Israel in their homes. Previously, after October 7, many of these people were relocated when the IDF started its military campaign. Now, the entirety of the south of Lebanon and many parts of even the capital, Beirut, are under shelling, whereas Israeli citizens who are from the north are still in their villages. So I think that Israel is betting on a gradual destruction of Hezbollah's infrastructure. But for the time being, the buffer zone is enough.
Makram, I'm just wondering if these tens of thousands of residents trying to work out when they might be able to return home, do you think they understand the Israeli objectives? If that is going to be the trigger for them to be able to go home, that Israel reaches their targets, do they have a clear picture of what the Israeli targets might be or Israeli objectives, that being the trigger for them to go home? Do they think they know when they might be able to safely return home?
Well, I think this is something they haven't realized yet, despite the fact that Israelis' military objectives are very clear, because as you know, they have a clear communication strategy, and many of their spokespersons are on TV more than the actual Lebanese are. But more importantly, I think, and this is the most dramatic and traumatic part of this, that the Lebanese don't realize yet the only way for them to go back home is for them to disarm Hezbollah personally, right, and to ultimately get to the realization that for them to live in peace, they have to force or push their government to engage in peace talks. Because this idea of the conspiracy theory and that the Israelis do have a plan, the Israelis do have a plan, and they have communicated it really well over the years. As long as there is an existential threat to their northern border, military operations will continue. Especially the Shiites of Lebanon, they need to understand that their safety and their future depends on them staying in their villages, not now, but basically in the future. And the only way to achieve this, unfortunately, is to talk peace and to sign peace, which is something of a taboo when you talk about it within the Shiite community, because they believe that this is a religious war that should go on forever, and there's like a Zionist, Jewish, Freemason conspiracy. There might be, but the only way to protect yourself against this is to actually engage in a political discourse, because given the events that are unfolding, I don't think that Hezbollah has the military capability to actually deter anyone at the moment.
And what are the chances? You say the key to peace is disarming Hezbollah. What are the chances of that happening? Are there a growing number of people who see that as the solution as well and are willing to take action? Is there any sign of that happening?
Well, taking action is one thing, but believing that Hezbollah should disarm is something else. I do believe that the overwhelming majority of the Lebanese, including many of the Shiites, do believe that Hezbollah should disarm. However, the sectarian Lebanese system in itself allows for something like Hezbollah to be normalized and to say that basically these arms are for the Shiite community. And this is basically the most toxic element of the ongoing conflict. And I do believe that the fault actually lies on the President of the Republic, because since he was elected over a year ago, he always communicates with the Shiites of Lebanon through the mediaries of actually Hezbollah. He believes that Hezbollah are the custodians of the Shiites, and this is why he has to talk to them through Hezbollah, which is basically an Iranian proxy. So I believe that the Lebanese political establishment is collaborating indirectly by allowing the sectarian narrative to dominate the sovereignty narrative. At the end of the day, Lebanese army has failed miserably in disarming Hezbollah, knowing that the commander of the Lebanese armed forces has publicly said that his mission was accomplished by disarming Hezbollah south of the Litani. And thus, what the Israelis are doing right now is technically an implementation of the 1701 plus, which Lebanon has signed with Israel, basically.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting what you're saying, and it sort of goes to answer some of the questions that are being raised in the chat, at least that I'm looking at in YouTube, Anthony, because I think somebody was asking about why the Lebanese government or the Lebanese army does not disarm Hezbollah, and you directly answered that question, which leads me to the obvious one, at least to me. So if any disarmament of Hezbollah is not potentially on the cards within Lebanon itself, how does this current round of hostilities end? Are we looking at a full-scale Israeli invasion of Lebanon to try and decapitate Hezbollah? Or is it a case of these hostilities carry on until the next round of hostilities begin?
Since the start of all the attack on Iran, I've heard a lot of experts saying that it's impossible to topple a government, you need boots on the ground. This used to be the case in 1945, maybe, or in the 1970s. We're talking about 21st century warfare. I think that the Israelis don't really need to have a full-scale land invasion like the one they had in 1982. Or even after the end of the war, they don't really need to occupy the buffer zone. They can simply destroy it completely. And unfortunately, I don't see that the war will end without total disarmament, and more importantly, with the government actually taking lead. The Lebanese South, or the peripheries in general in Lebanon, have been left by the army and by the state. So it's not only about disarming Hezbollah, but actually deploying the army on the borders to prevent any sort of a future group, be it religious or even secular, to say that they want to continue fighting Israel outside the state. We cannot claim to be in a state of self-defense if we cross the border. And more importantly, I think the Lebanese, and particularly the Shiites of Lebanon, should read the area. Lebanon is not the only country at the moment under assault, because Iran is also systematically trying to go after the Gulf countries who have historically helped Lebanon. So after the end of the war, I don't think that the priority of the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia, will be to pump money into Lebanon. And this is a very important thing. The war will live on unless we address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that the Lebanese have allowed Hezbollah to expose its existence vis-a-vis the ongoing crisis in the region.
I mean, it's quite a bit of insight that we're getting from you, and something for our viewers and our community to mull over. But then we'll leave it there for the moment. Professor Makram Rabah from the American University of Beirut. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for making the time for us for this stream today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Makram.
So that was about the Israeli campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon. But as we said earlier, attacks against Iran continue, and the Iranian ambassador to the UN made this plea at the UN.
The international community must act now to stop this bloody war against the Iranian people. We will take all necessary measures to defend our people, our territory, and our independence. We reiterate our call on all member states to condemn this aggression and take urgent action to stop this criminal war against the Iranian people, a war that poses a serious threat to regional and international peace.
All right, let's get more now from Ali Fatullah Nejad. He's director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order. Thanks for waiting patiently for us to come to you, Ali. Good to have you on the stream. We'll get to analysis about what Iran maybe trying to do and how it's fighting in a moment. But first, we really want to sort of focus on how Iranians are coping with these combined strikes against them from the US and Israel. What are you hearing from within your networks?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that Iran has a population of 90 million. And there are a lot of different views. And actually, I'm hearing, every single day, I'm hearing, other assessments of people on the ground regarding the war. So there is no, clear one-sentence answer to your question. There is a sense of, uncertainty. I think before we enter the discussion, we have to perhaps talk about the context in which this war has happened, which is that earlier this year, we've seen the largest anti-regime protest since 1979, with millions of Iranians taking to the streets. And they were met with the iron fist with machine guns by the regime that is engaged in a historical massacre against them, probably killing tens of thousands of people within just a few days. So, in the wake of this great massacre, there were a lot of hopes that there would be some kind of international support. There were even prominent Iranian human rights lawyers who have been calling for some kind of humanitarian intervention. But then again, we have to also acknowledge the fact that geopolitical interests of foreign powers are not, compatible necessarily with the interests of the Iranian people.
Right.
And then we've seen the start of the war, and there has been, a complex set of reactions.
Let's come back to that. But just as a general question, given the amount of bombing and the attacks that Iran is facing on a daily basis, how much longer do you think the civilian population can hold out? How much more punishment can the civilian population take?
Well, the whole picture is already very much complicated by the fact that the internet is cut out by the Iranian regime. This happened during the protests earlier this year, and this has also happened since the start of the war. So it's really, hard to get connected with people inside of Iran. In terms of how long Iranian society can manage, they have to manage this situation. They have no control whatsoever on the situation. We don't have a representative democracy at all in Iran. We have basically a regime that is taking the Iranian people hostage in this situation. But historically speaking, the Iranian people have shown a lot of resilience.
I know there are no straight answers to the situation in Iran, but I do need to ask you, because you were talking about these anti-regime protests that were happening before this war started, and now Iran has a new leader, begging the question, does he have a broad mandate? Is there any way in which you can answer that question based on what is happening in Iran, what you're seeing?
Yeah, of course it doesn't have that. The situation has not changed in Iran over the last few years. There is a huge gulf between state and society, one of the largest gulfs probably on the world stage. There is no comparison really between states and society in Iran. From all we can gather for years now, the situation is quite clear. The social base of the regime is quite thin. It probably encompasses 10 to 15% of the population, and over 80% of the Iranian population oppose the Islamic Republic. So based on that sociological situation or societal situation, there is, of course, very little support for any kind of supreme leader that is nominated.
What is the Iranian strategy right now? You have a new leader, Iranian attacks and retaliatory attacks continue. How much longer can Iran do this? And what is the strategic thinking right now in the Iranian regime? Have they changed their military tactics at all? What does that tell us?
No, they haven't changed anything. From day one, they've been, lashing out against all of their neighbors, specifically this time around against the GCC countries, by, sending hundreds of missiles and drones against all the countries in the GCC, targeting their energy infrastructure, but also hotels and international airports. So the Iranian strategy is to create chaos and instability in the Gulf so that the Gulf leaders gonna push Trump to end the war, which the Iranian regime sees as an existential war. But this kind of strategy has created a lot of, not only a lot of havoc, but also a lot of frustration. Iran has been ready to burn the bridges with the Gulf in order to get what it wants, that is the end of the war. And at the same time, it is putting pressure on the world economy. It is putting pressure on Western public opinion, basically with the same aim. So to put pressure on Trump so that at some point you're gonna call it an end.
I'll let you stay on the line, and I know you want to come in, Anthony, but just to sort of let our viewers know what they were watching, it was basically, I believe, live images from Tehran of a rally in support of some of the people who have been killed in these latest round of facilities. But then, Anthony, please, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a couple of comments coming through while we're here from YouTube. What happens if 3 foreign countries dislike our leader in the USA? Do we force our leader to be captured and removed? Yulia Robert, not her, on TikTok, always men beating their chest. And Bob Hatter says Trump wants a new leader of Iran. Does that constitute election interference? We've talked a lot about Iran burning their bridges in the region. How much retaliation is there left? Do we have any way of gauging how much longer they can keep fighting back as they are now?
Well, I mean, there is also, I mean, the issue is about munitions, and I mean, it's the rocket arsenal, the missile arsenal. If it's depleted, then maybe we're going to see a change. But this is not going to be the change, actually, because any kind of single Iranian missile or actually drones, which Iranians can easily manufacture, can create the same kind of chaos and stability that I've sketched out earlier. So from the Iranian side, there is no real limitation to continue this kind of destabilization. On the other hand, we have to see whether on the opposing side, that is the Israeli-American side, there is some kind of limitations to their munitions in terms of interceptors. Yeah, so this situation could well go on, actually.
Help us understand this, Ali, because what we've been hearing from official sources in Iran has been that Iran does not want a ceasefire. It is not asking for a ceasefire from either the Americans or the Israelis. Do you find that strange, given the amount of punishment that Iran is facing, or is that a calculated strategy because the Iranian regime is confident it has enough stockpiles, enough munitions to be able to keep retaliating against the attacks it's facing?
I think it's precisely the latter that you pointed out that is adequate. So they think that they can go on with this. There is, of course, heavy targeting of the Israelis and the Americans against regime infrastructure. But through airstrikes alone, it's quite unlikely that you can bring about a regime change. Plus, you have in the Iranian case this kind of level of ideology where martyrdom is somehow celebrated. So there are various factors, plus the fact that in terms of reaching a ceasefire or reaching a deal with the United States, the Iranian regime fears that it has to succumb some kind of a Trumpian diktat, giving away, stopping its not only nuclear program, but also, much of its ballistic missile programs. So it does see the costs also of a deal with Trump. But for now, it seems, they think that their strategy has been quite successful so far. Given also that quite recently, because of increasing internal pressure, Trump has somehow, announced that the war is going to end soon. So they see some of the fruits of this strategy already.
I do want to bring this question up, and I'm also aware that you need to leave in about 1 minute and 15 seconds. I don't know if that deadline has changed for you, Ali. But then Benjamin Netanyahu has urged Iranians to basically take control of the regime and remove the Ayatollah regime. Do you think that's a realistic prospect?
Well, in the fog of war, it's not very realistic. A lot of scenarios are possible, so I have no certainty, whatsoever to tell you what the outcome of any of this gonna be. But assuming that, let's assume that regime infrastructure is heavily weakened, and also a lot of repressive forces are killed. And then on the other hand, you have a population, many of which are very furious about the regime and they want to get rid of the regime because they fear that if the regime going to be at, in its place after, the war ends, it's going to re-engage in another great massacre against them. So in that scenario that you outlined, then people would have to take to the streets. But they should get armed in order to change the balance of forces. So I would regard at this point of time this kind of scenario not very likely.
Right. I'm assuming that you are going to stick to your deadline and you need to leave. Is that the case, Ali? Because,
I still have a few minutes, so 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah.
If you still have 2 or 3 minutes, let me just ask you one final question. I thought the earlier one was the final question. Let me just ask this. The American side has been talking about Iran giving up and destroying Iran's nuclear facility so that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Whenever all this ends, do you see a situation, and I know I'm asking you to do crystal ball gazing, but do you see a situation in which Iran, whatever the regime is, will ever give up its nuclear ambitions after everything that it's been through?
Well, I think much more than the nuclear ambitions is the missile program. I think this has been, as we know from the developments of the past few years, this has been the main instrument of Iranian power projection, of Iranian negative power in the region. When it comes to going for a nuclear weapon, of course, potentially if the regime going to be at its place, and going to survive this war, the appetite toward nuclear weaponization going to be strong. But then again, we have the Israel factor. Israel is going to probably make sure that is not going to happen, as the United States is probably going to do. But then again, even Iran, acquiring a nuclear weapon would perhaps not satisfy all the expectations that the regime associates with it, that is to immunize it from foreign aggression.
All right. I think we've stretched our time with you long enough, and I'm getting the impression that you do need to go. Ali, we'll leave it there for the moment. Ali Fathullah Nejad, Director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order, thanks so much for making the time. It's been quite a lively chat, hasn't it?
It has been a very lively chat.
On just in YouTube, but I know you're looking at TikTok as well.
Yes, TikTok, Public Menace is asking saying that Iran must choose the next US president. That sounds like a fair swap.
That would have been something that we could have put to Ali. Pity he couldn't stay longer, but maybe next time. But it's comments like that. It's that kind of views that we want in the chat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It helps us.
And Bob Hattis on YouTube, Trump wants the next leader of Iran. That's election interference. A bit of the tone from the YouTube chat coming in there as well.
It is always good to have that tone. We welcome that. That is a nice, positive tone, if not cynical. But, if you're just joining us, a quick recap of what's been happening. We've been talking about specific things in terms of Israel's attacks against Iran and Lebanon, but here is what else is happening in this war. So there are unconfirmed reports that the International Energy Agency is recommending a record release of oil reserves to stabilize oil prices. That the drawdown is expected to exceed the 182 million barrels of oil that were released in 2 tranches in 2022 when Russia attacked Ukraine. There's also reports that several commercial ships have been struck in the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia is saying that it has intercepted drones targeting Shaiba oil field and also ballistic missiles targeting its eastern region and the Prince Sultan Air Base. And the United States claimed Tuesday was the most intense day of strikes on Iran. It also said that it eliminated 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz really in focus here, and I believe you can talk to us a bit about the Strait of Hormuz.
There was a question in chat specifically asking about the Strait of Hormuz. It's come up there in our recap. I want to share my screen with you if we can, if we try and get a picture of what's actually happening there. Here is marinetraffic.com, the global shipping tracker. We can see the Strait of Hormuz where my cursor is there, and Oman is this point of land here at the top. That's giving you an idea of the region and how many ships are in the region. The reason we're talking about it is that there have been incidents. Now, these flags here relate to the latest incidents. Now, on the left-hand side, you see the advisory for 11th of March. I'm going to start on the top here, and with that highlighted, we can see the UK MTO, Maritime Traffic via the UK, has received 17 reports of vessels, incidents infecting vessels around the Arabian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Oman. Total attacks reports 11, suspicious reports as well of 4. Now, if I'm going to click on this top one to get a better idea, this one here has received a report of an incident northwest of Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. The master and bulk carrier has reported that the vessel has been hit by an unknown projectile. There is no report of any environmental impact. The crew has been reported safe and well. Authorities are investigating. Now, that has since been evacuated, that ship. And if we go in here, we try and work out perhaps which ship this is. We're focusing in here. The top we see Iran. And we go back to where we know these reports were. Let's overlay that one more time quickly. There are the flags of the reports and the top of Oman sticking out the bottom of picture. And we go here to the strait again. My cursor is hovering over this particular ship here. And that is the Mayuri Nari of particular interest. That's where we know there have been reports. We don't know exactly which ship, but if we're trying to deduce, that was a ship in the area. It is a Panama registered vehicle. And its current speed is 1.1 knots. If indeed a ship has been evacuated and is without a captain and without a crew, I would put it to you that might most likely be it in the area. The whole area is obviously of interest. We've had other boats around that area been hit by unidentified drones. They're saying that they're unidentified and they've hit above the waterline. So it's come from the air, a missile or a drone. That is also consistent. I'm going to come back to my screen just to give you an idea of the region. That is a very sparsely populated strait. You did this the other day in one of the streams talking about the traffic, right? Interestingly, of what boats will now do to try and maybe stay out of trouble. I'm hovering over a ship that is not in trouble, but just look at the way that they are now listing their destination, what they're trying to say to the world. I'm going to try and highlight that if I can on this very tricky mousepad. China, owner, all Chinese. That is listed as their destination, perhaps trying to say to whoever might be out there and thinking of attacking them, we are Chinese-owned, we are all Chinese. And that goes for other boats in the region too. The only other vessel near them to the west, China, owner and crew, and that's the Heilan Journey, another Panama vessel known as a flag of convenience. It's built elsewhere but registered in Panama. That's the only one in the region trying to move. That one's still got a speed and course that suggests everything's okay, but that's the lengths they're going to at the moment. It must be an incredibly uncomfortable position to be in for those sailors.
I mean, it's incredible, these live maps and the information that they provide. And it's very interesting that you say that they're changing the destination, or at least appears to be listing China as a destination, because there were reports one there that Chinese ships or ships headed towards China would get some sort of an exemption from attacks by the Revolutionary Guard. There was some talk about that. Maybe this is what it shows in action. But then again, this is conjecture at the moment. But then thank God for live maps. And thanks for presenting that. You did a way better job than I did last time. That was last week, I think. I think that's about it for the stream for the moment. Thank you so much for being here. Besides YouTube, you can always find us on TikTok, where this stream has been streaming. And don't forget Instagram. There's lots there as well. Lots of vertical videos to update you on the latest situation.
Big thanks to our YouTube audience and the TikTok audience. There was some interesting exchanges.
Interesting is a word, yeah.
But we really appreciate the support, and I think we're all getting the hang of this interaction and how much we need you, how much it makes a good show great.
Thanks so much for being here. I think we'll have another live stream potentially tomorrow, potentially at the same time. But then we'll see how developments are panning out. We'll take your feedback and be back again with another live stream, most likely. Thanks so much for today. See you all again later. Bye.
Bye for now.